Hello, Internet. It is time for another Wednesday's cereal. That's right. What you've all been waiting for all week. Before I start actually talking about the issues, though, I wanted to mention someone in the community here. Running with Comics has really been picking up his game lately. He's started doing a lot of great trade reviews, and he's done a lot on Preacher. He's done some other books too, but those have really spoke out to me because that's a book that I really enjoyed. And he hasn't... I don't think he's found as much in it as I have, like, to the extent I have. It's clear he's been enjoying it, but I mean, that's like one of my like go-to greatest books. And he brings up some really valid kind of criticisms in it, but also talks about it in a lot of cool ways, and that's really good. He also has a new intro, which is awesome and makes me feel just lazy for not having one. So yeah, you guys should go, if you haven't, go check out his channel, or at the very least, if you haven't checked it out this week, go check out the new intro and hear what he has to say about his week's stack. And first up, you know what I'm bringing up. I want to talk about, actually, both of the Turtles books. I know this one came out last week, but I just got it this week due to a kind of shipping deal, I believe, problem. It happens to all of us from time to time. But what's interesting is Turtles 30 is a great book, and if you can, I'd really recommend this cover. I don't know what it is, but I really like just the serenity and the mostly white there, and it really reflects what's going on in the issue as well. Also, this cover is by the guy who does the interiors, who does a really awesome job, Ross Campbell, who's been doing it for a little while now. And this issue is really great because it speaks to something I heard someone mention about video games recently, but it replies almost doubly so to comics. And that is, we deal with a lot of like high action stuff and a lot of things that have a lot of weight. But in order for a lot of those things to have impact, you need quiet time. You need to let the characters have their moments. You need to let tensions build. You need to let the atmosphere and kind of what's going on soak in, so that when something comes and breaks it violently so and you end up in a fight, there's some gusto behind it. Yeah. And what's really interesting is, if you're willing to expound this back a little bit, the way American comics do it is generally always pushing forward. And the Turtles do it that way too, but if you read something like Naruto or in manga, what they'll do is they'll actually basically start the fight, and like in between punches they'll have like huge amounts of flashback, like building up the characters, sometimes building up the tension, stuff like that. And it's more their way of doing it, so that like every hit or every moment of the fight kind of like has this weight behind it. And if you kind of read it like that, there's something extra there. Given that we're a more Western culture, we tend to push forward, and our meaning comes from how we advance. So it's interesting there, and I do really appreciate the quiet time going on in this book, which is the main book. Meanwhile, in Untram Empire, which is just Turtles B-Track, they always have some other comic every month. First of all, I don't like the art as much because Andy Kuhn is back, but he's, it feels like he's picked up his game, but for the most part, the Turtles aren't really in this issue, which is usually where I feel his design falls apart. So, this is much more readable, and I was really enjoying myself. Here we mostly deal with Stockman and the Fugitoid, and it's their little interplay, and it's bringing in the whole Triceraton-Utrom war, and really playing up, and they have kind of touched on this, but here they really blatantly state that Krang is really one of the last of the Utroms, and that's part of the reason that they're pushing this big, violent empire thing forwards, and also kind of explains the needs for the robotics and all that. It's kind of interesting too, given that like it makes sense that they're like the super smart diabolical species because the Utroms are basically living brains, not much else. But the Triceratons are just kind of these brute forces, but they're not dumb by any means, but they're not quite on that level, I guess. And it's just a lot of crazy interplay. And the turtles actually have fairly little to do with it, actually. I feel like they're really trying to play on the old Fugitoid comic here, which was always tangentially tied to the turtles, except right at the very beginning. But tying it into the license and everything and making it work, it's really interesting. But this is definitely B-track. If you're looking to get into the turtles, I mean, you probably could miss this. On the other hand, this is so much better than most of the other stuff out there. So, raw, but definitely enjoying these, but it's really nice to have two books at the same place. Like, this is a very emotional, heartfelt, kind of, like I said, quiet moment thing, and this is this, like, huge picking up, like, as it says, Utrom Empire, and it's like war going on and very political, and it's just interesting to have these two things going at once and kind of two ends of the spectrum, but really kind of playing to the same universe, and it's just exciting to have all that moving at once. Alright, next I want to talk about Black Science and Saga. Man, Black Science was a trip to read because this book is just kind of like skipping through characters, and they basically are just jumping from one idea to the next, and you're almost dealing with like really 4 different parts just within this one issue, and it's like crazy, and I'm trying to remember what happened. I'm having less of a grasp on it, and it's just trucking along, and everything looks gorgeous. And this book is great, and it's a great true science fiction book, really playing on different elements and playing what you can do when you extrapolate different ideas of humanity and make them even, and this book does it so perfectly for this kind of a metaphor, just alienate it just a little so that you're looking at a new light. And it's interesting. There's definitely a frame in here where you see this clearly Native American character scalping guy, and it's so terrifying. Like, it kind of makes sense, some of the like fear and hatred that other people have for it, because that's scary, and choosing like an image like that for your enemy, like that's like a propaganda thing, but it's like that frame was really like, holy crap, wow, okay. But it's just like a moment in this story, and then we're on to another beat. So it's kind of crazy, but it's also really hard to keep up with everything going on. And this has been amazing so far, but it feels like the threads are so loose that it... I don't know if this reads better in issue or trade, because it's so jumpy. I'm not even sure if it really matters. Whereas normally the kind of book that I feel read better in trade is this, Saga, but each issue has a beat, and I like being on top of it, and I really enjoy reading this. Also, being able to soak in, take in all these gorgeous covers doesn't hurt anything. And in here, we're really getting the conclusion of this Love Shack story, and we're getting some really cool action. We're getting a little bit, but oh man, I mean, everything between Gwendolyn showing up and her being true to her character, but also twisting at the last minute here is incredible, and seeing how she's dealing with everything. Then Prince Robot 4, like Fritz's, and it's something that I really enjoyed because they're very much these like humanoid androids, but the character is acting and reacting and like a robot, like a machine on some level too, and it's one of the greatest plays for that I've really seen. Whereas a lot of times, you know, robots are basically at a certain point after they gain their humanity are more or less treated like a superhuman, that, you know, like they can be not so easily harmed, or they can be repaired or whatever. But I mean, basically, it doesn't make sense that like they don't have a heart or anything. Like it doesn't really work. Whereas here, they're characters and they have their own civilization, but they are still mechanical beings, and that interplays very well here. It's just a microcosm of all these different characters finally coming together. And we get a new character introduced via the Wills kind of sideline going on here, and it's just whereas, you know, there's definite chunks in this. I think many would argue would read better in trade. I feel like going along issue to issue like makes it easier to read because you get it when you get it and you stay on top of everything. Whereas this, it's so scatterbrained that it's the inverse of why I normally think a trade would be better, but because there's so many loose threads, I feel like you need to have them tighter together in your mind to really get the full idea of the story and the connections and honestly some of the illusions that they're going for in here. So since I'm doing 2x2s, let's do my DC books for the week. Batman Robin Annual and Green Team. Good? Bad. Okay. So, this Batman Robin Annual is just a fun aside and really delves into something I think a lot of people who like Batman comics, which is 50% of what DC publishes, really going, and they talk about the first Robin adventure. So you're going back and you're seeing Dick as Robin back when he was in high school, and there's some cool interplay, and it definitely feels like Dick in the costume, but they also, this is also wrapped around the idea of Damian having been there and kind of a fond memory to that playing in. But I mean, it plays into this idea that they are kind of like a family, but this is what they do, and it all just works very well, and it fits what Tomasi's been doing, and this is like the best Bat book you could be picking up all month. Yeah, it's an annual, it's a little more, but it's a fun whole deal, and it's a great romp, and if you've been curious about kind of the history of the Robins in the New 52, this is a must. So kind of crazy, and also, you know, Batman comes off like a dick, so I can get behind that. And Green Team, just, they wrap up and they have this huge fight, blah blah blah, and it doesn't really matter, and half the characters that they were building up that was interested in the Green Team just like aren't even present except in the background here or there. And then randomly the Teen Titans show up, and then they don't even necessarily buy the Teen Titans. I don't even know what the fuck that means. And then series ends, and then Teen Titans ends soon too, so I don't... What? Okay. Thanks for that, DC. That was necessary. Just don't. If you can avoid the Green Team at this point, just don't. There was a little bit of promise, then it was all dashed. All of it. So we have Night of the Living Deadpool, and less of a general zombie parody this time. This, I mean, I don't know if it really is supposed to be this way the whole time, or maybe just issue by issue it's a different kind of level of parody, but this is totally just riffing on The Walking Dead, but it just doesn't have a lot of substance. I don't know what it is. This miniseries is just not grabbing me. Maybe it's because I just don't give a shit about zombies anymore. I don't know, but it's here. There's like only 2 more issues, I assume, so woo-wee. This has been the worst bun Deadpool miniseries yet. If you're looking, look elsewhere. Then, in a bit of comic news, it sounds like Gail Simone will be penning a new Tomb Raider comic. I don't know. I recently just finished the new Tomb Raider game, and it was okay. But there's going to be some weird mysticism, I assume, in the comic, because that was a heavy-handed part of the game. I don't know what it is, but the idea of them just it sounded. I mean, the article I read made it sound like they were waiting for Gail Simone to do it, but either way, it's just kind of annoying that it's like, oh, it's this female icon, so we need to get Gail Simone to do it, and they couldn't find anyone else to write it, and that's I don't know. I mean, she's definitely a good writer. It's just given everything around this, I'm not super excited for it, but I feel like I should give it a shot, given that I was kind of a fan of the game. I'm generally a fan of her writing, whatnot, but for whatever reason, I'm just not super excited, but maybe it'll blow the socks off. I don't know. I'm also just wondering what they can do with a comic that isn't going to either just be an adaptation of, or really just be shallow echoes of the story of the game. So here's hoping they can do something at least interesting with that. Also, I can't bring the images here, but I'm sure many of you have seen the various images of the Turtles from the upcoming Turtles movie, and this keeps getting shoved in my face, and everything about that movie, at this point, I just honestly don't know if I want to see it. I just don't know if I care. I mean, I know it's Ninja Turtles, but it doesn't really feel like the story or anything that I care about of it, and I've always felt like there's different Turtles. So, because, I mean, even from the beginning, like, the cartoons versus the Mirage stuff, it's a completely different thing. It's like taking the 66 TV show Batman and comparing it to, like, Frank Miller. You know, it's a different thing. And although I guess fans tend to rally around both, I don't know, for whatever reason, I'm not super excited about that either. What I am excited about is continuation of a lot of these awesome comics coming out, and I'm kind of charting a path. I have a little bit of DC and Marvel to catch up on soon, because I plan on reading some Superior Spider-Man and Green Lantern whenever my shipment gets in, and then I really plan on trying to read some different stuff this year, and maybe try to be more on the beat of original graphic novels and things of that sort, to try to expand the palette a little, because I'm starting to get to the point where all the superhero comics are feeling kind of same to me, and maybe it's just because I've read too many of them, and it's time to not give up on them, but move on when I'm looking, honestly, for something different. So, there you go. Cheers. And I'll catch y'all soon with videos and shiz, yo.